Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia, and of course an MSNBC international affairs analyst. And Mike, you know, there's been sort of multiple theories as to what the Russians did with the Trump campaign, that it was just, you know, somehow big secret meeting, Trump and Putin got together and plotted all this out, or more realistically, it was some form of the spread offense by the Russians. It doesn't seem as if it was one attempt, that it was 30 attempts. Is that fair?
Yeah, I like that metaphor, spread offense, for sure. And over multiple years and multiple modalities of different kinds of things they did, right? They reached out directly and offered up compromise on the candidate, but then they stole data and published it, unprecedented, with the DNC and Podesta. And then they had another operation going on social media. And then they had another operation going on with civil society, as we would call it generally, working directly through the NRA to try to create a back channel. So it was a comprehensive strategy on multiple fronts, trying to influence the outcome of the election. I like the metaphor. I'm going to use that, Chuck.
Take it away. Let me put up a list of just, because what's interesting here is all of these Russian operatives, in some ways, that have some connections to the Kremlin, and yet they were on different. So you have Alexander Torshin, a former Russian senator. He somehow penetrated the NRA in Donald Trump Jr. Then you had the ambassador, Sergei Kislyak. He got access to Jeff Sessions, Michael Flynn. Sergei Gorkov, the banker, did some work with the Trump org. You had Putin's spokesman somehow had access when they were talking about Trump Tower 2. The Kremlin lawyer, Veselnitskaya. We have Maria Butina, the Algorov father and son, Konstantin Kilimnik. And they're all sort of connected to a different part of the organization. It's very possible none of them knew what the other was doing either, correct?
Yes, that's very possible. I think that's right. But it's not very possible that the Kremlin and Putin didn't know what they were all doing. And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand.
He's the spider, but there were all sorts of extended webs that not everybody knew who was operating in which web segment.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, that's consistent with other behavior that I know that Vladimir Putin does in other countries and in his own country. You know, the second piece, you mentioned Sergei Gorkov very briefly there. I'm glad you reminded everybody about him, because he's faded away. But remember, he was in charge at the time of Russia's largest bank, one of the largest banks of the top three, completely owned by the state, was meeting with Jared Kushner during the transition.
Well, there's the weird server.
If you recall, they needed to try to meet.
And there's that weird story about the banks, the server that only seemed to have the bank and Trump Tower connected. But
there's that one, too, yes. So, you know, I think it just underscores that this was comprehensive. Putin was playing to win. And I really do believe, as we talked before, he was seeking to get revenge from what he believed was what Secretary Clinton did during his parliamentary election back in 2011. And he went on the offensive in 2016.
You know, you and I have often had this conversation that, oh, boy, you know, this was too successful in hindsight. Putin probably wishes he'd have come up just short. He'd rather have a damaged Hillary Clinton than what he ended up with this. But watching the Western world over the last 48 hours and watching the chaos in Parliament in the UK and obviously the Russian influence campaign on Brexit, watching what's happening to Macron, I wonder if you want to revise that. Is Putin sitting there going, boy, this thing is working like a charm?
Yes. So I think it's important to separate out that he didn't get the deliverables, as we would call it in the government, from the election immediately, right? He didn't get sanctions lifted. He didn't get recognition of Crimea, those kinds of things. But the chaos that President Trump has caused to the Western democratic world, not only within our own country, but within the alliance, within the EU, that is exactly what Vladimir Putin wants. The withdrawal of the American leadership, that creates a vacuum for Vladimir Putin. So the long-term payoff, I think, has been extraordinary for him, even if the short-term payoffs have not come through.
How difficult is this going to be to repair? You know, let's say there's a new administration at some point and that will want to actually get tough on Russia. How long will it take to put this toothpaste back in the tube?
Well, I think if Trump is a one-term president, there's a chance for renewal, and I'm always an optimist about this stuff. I think the midterm elections, talking to Europeans that I know, has given them new confidence that we may be recommitted to being the leader of the democratic world in a way that President Trump does not want to play that role, and he's been very clear about that.
Right.
He doesn't want to play that role. He has a different strategy. I think if Trump is reelected, then you have to begin to wonder about particularly the transatlantic alliance, which I think, is in a pretty shaky place right now.
Is.
But could it survive 8 years of the Trump presidency? I'm not so sure. I think you would see a real pivot to what we've already seen signs of, that
Right.
we have to go our own way, including in defense matters, if they've already hinted at.
Right. Well, it's like if it's America first, then everybody's going to be like, well, then it's France first, Germany first, UK first. And you're right. That's exactly what President Trump would say. So what? Ambassador McFaul, good to see you, sir. Sorry that you don't have playoff plans with Stanford this year, but there's always next year.
You had to say that, didn't you?
Yeah, well, you had a
We'll
slightly,
be back next year.
You had a slightly better season than my Miami Hurricanes, but that's about it. Thank you,
that's
sir.
true.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.